Okay, thank you very much. My name's Jeff Anderson. First of all, I'd like to thank you for making the long trip. Some of you have made the long trip from around the world. Some of you have made the long trip across the road. Either way, thank you very much for coming over, hearing what's new in Office 2010 and some of the ways we can think about deploying it. As I said, I'm Jeff Anderson. I'm a Senior Product Manager in the Office PMG in Redmond. I've been in the job about 3.5, 4 years now, so I'm starting to understand the product. And I would really like to say that I've been a little bit ambitious with this session. So I just want to start with that expectation that really there are 3 things I think we need to cover, and we've only got an hour to do it. So this could be a little challenging. What are those 3 things? Well, I want to really draw on the experience I have of talking to customers, mainly in our executive briefing center, and say, the question I ask them is, why aren't you deploying Office 2010? Because it's more useful than, would you like to, right? So I get 3 answers back. The first is, there's not enough value. All right, so what's the value to the business? What's the value to IT? So I need to spend at least 1/3 of the presentation dealing with that. That's going to be the bit where I talk about what the product does. Number 2, it's too hard to migrate and to deploy. Documents, macros, add-ins, these are things that make people's head hurt, right? There's that whole process of, okay, I've decided I want it, now how am I going to get this out to my people? Oh, and speaking of which, my people, my users can't cope with change, okay? If I put this thing out there, they'll all be horribly confused. I don't want to train everyone again, and the ribbon scares someone, them, me, someone else. Doesn't really matter. People have this fear of the ribbon. And so I want to talk for about 20 minutes, maybe 15 by then, about what we're doing to help you with that part of the process as well. Let me take my watch off so I can try and stay on more or less on time. Do these look like 3 good topics that would keep you in the room? I see sort of minor nods. I've had a lot more coffee than anyone else in the room this morning, so interesting. Right, here we go. So let's talk first of all. They say when they teach kids sport, they say you've got to want the ball, right? If you want to win, you've got to want the ball. If you're going to deploy Office, you've got to want Office. You've got to understand the value, and you've got to want to go out there and go through the process of deploying. So this section is really all about what did we do, why did we do it? So when we built Office 2010, we were really looking at doing 4 things. We wanted to help people work better together. We wanted to help them bring ideas to life, use Office Anywhere, and we wanted to build what we called the practical productivity platform. In other words, we wanted to build something that was easy for IT to manage and use. So I borrowed some of our marketing slides just because it's the easiest way to put together really quickly what we think is new. So let me go through some of these feature function things and try and articulate them in a way that makes sense to the business. Incidentally, there are some seats down the front here. I know I'm very frightening, but if you're prepared to take the risk, you can actually have a seat. If you think this is going to be really boring and you'll be leaving within 3 minutes, then you're probably in the best place. So what's new in Office 2010? First of all, work better together. So co-authoring, probably the thing most people have heard the most about. The ability for Word and PowerPoint users to work on documents at the same time together. So think of policy groups, think of people working on RFPs, the ability for multiple people to work on documents together, see each other's updates, new in 2010. Gain control over email with conversation management. Everything we invest in Outlook is incredibly valuable because people deal with so much mail. Most of us come into 40, 50, 100 mails a morning. If we make a change to how you deal with each one of those, it actually starts to add up. There's lots of kind of false business value TCO type propositions based on doing things lots of times. Mail isn't one of them. Mail, if you make a difference to how fast people can process it, it makes a difference to their day. Broadcast slideshow, the ability to go into PowerPoint, hit the PowerPoint broadcast button, and actually broadcast live to someone in a browser, whether they're in your company or not. So virtually deliver a presentation. The key point there is not that you can do that. You've been able to do that with a live meeting and various other things. It's that it's right there in PowerPoint. It's as easy to click broadcast slideshow and send the URL to someone as it is to broadcast it in the room. In fact, given our setup hassles, possibly easier. And combine business social networking with the social connector. So we wanted to make Outlook in particular the centerpiece for how people thought about social networking. Whether it's social networking as you might think of it in Facebook or in LinkedIn, and bringing those contacts into Outlook, or whether it's social networking within the enterprise, which is actually an interesting beast that I don't have time to talk about, which is really about, I guess, in a nutshell, in the outside world, the unit is friends. Inside the business, the unit is really experts. In the same way that I want to connect with my friends on Facebook, within my enterprise, I really want to connect with experts who are doing things I'm interested in. So social networking in the enterprise, slightly different focus, same basic idea of what people want to do. So I'll show you a little bit of that. The second one, bring ideas to life. So find more with the Backstage view and the Fluent user interface. Show you that really quickly, so I won't go on with it here. Tell a story with photo and video editing. Okay, forget the tell a story bit. Photo and video editing, the analysts say before 2013, we will actually have 25% of documents with rich content in them. 25%. Today, that number's about 0.5%. So over the next 3 or so years, you're going to see this amazing transformation, really, driven by the YouTube generation coming out of university, where rich content will become more and more significant. And so we wanted to build the tools into PowerPoint so that you can preempt that trend, so that you don't have to give out video editing software just so people can get the right snippet of video in PowerPoints. And make sense of data with PowerPivot, Sparkline, Slices. New investments in our ongoing quest to bring business intelligence to more people more easily. Use Office Anywhere. Obviously, the thing you've probably heard most about in the media, the Office web apps. Today, I'm actually going to talk very little about them. I have another session on Wednesday where I'm talking about Office and SharePoint working together. I'll save most of my web app stuff for there. But just be aware, the Office web apps give people the ability to work from anywhere. They can open documents, they can do lightweight edits from any supported browser, Internet Explorer, Firefox latest version, Safari 4 on Mac. So it's very, very easy for people to see their documents. And not just the data, but the rich formatting and fidelity and sparklines. Here's my first ad for Wednesday. If you come on Wednesday, you'll get to see how amazingly rich this experience is. Keep up on the go with SharePoint Workspace. Hey, I didn't know that button was there. Keep up on the go with SharePoint Workspace means that we make it very, very easy for people to take their SharePoint content and carry it with them offline. That's actually significant if you're trying to drive a SharePoint strategy in your organization. Because, of course, the real challenge with SharePoint uptake for most organizations is that people still find it easier to save to their local hard drive than they do to save into SharePoint. Anyone suffer from that problem? 1, 2, 3. Okay, not a high percentage. I'm presuming there are more. So, well, for the 3 of you, we solved it. And for everyone else who didn't admit it, we solved it too. So, what this enables people to do is transparently store stuff in SharePoint and then have it with them, and it automatically updates behind the scenes. Some very nice stuff there. And do more with Windows Mobile or Nokia. So those are our kind of official things. Every release we do hundreds of little features, if you like. They're not a little feature if you're the team building them, but they all add up. So this is just kind of a list in no particular order of things that I really like. I shouldn't do all of them or I'll completely run out of time. Paste preview. I can look and see how something will look before I paste it. Interesting stat. We found out from the data that comes back on, how people say, I'd like to sign up to anonymously give data to Microsoft around how I use Office, that customer user experience thing. We get millions of records a day anonymously from that thing. And we found out that 20% of the UI interactions are actually copy-paste. It's the most common UI interaction of all, copy-paste. Any guesses what the next most common keystroke was in Office 2007? Undo, yeah. Delete was a close third, actually, but actually it's undo, right? So in an effort to make this more efficient, we added paste preview. So now you can hover over, you can see what it looks like, and it's great. You click on it. Little hint for those of you who want to go and show this within your organization. One minor thing we haven't fixed yet is it doesn't actually work with dual monitors. So I'm not going to demo it to you today because I embarrassed myself greatly at my last presentation by saying, this is also, oh, no, it's not. Just nothing happened at all. If you're just an individual user, works great. Okay. Alignment bars in PowerPoint. We took the Visio engine from from Visio and put it into PowerPoint. So now when I'm dragging and dropping things on PowerPoints, they all line up and I can immediately see where they go. Really minor, really cool. One from my dad, actually, recover unsaved or older files. I once got asked by my dad, hey, how do I get back the file that I said I didn't want to save? Answer, Office 2010. This is, of course, configurable. If you're worried about old versions of files lying around and you have that sort of environment, then you don't have to turn it on. But by default, files that you say no to can be recovered by the user for 4 days, which means that if people make a lot of changes, hit the wrong button, they can get it back. Let's not do all of this stuff at once because we'll run out of time. I'm going to show you that. Backstage printing, insert screenshot. Is there anything I should talk about here more than anything else? Author attribution in OneNote. Let's talk about OneNote just briefly for 2 reasons. The first thing we've done with OneNote is licensing change. OneNote is now in Office Standard 2010. It's in Office Professional Plus 2010. So it's in both the volume licensing editions. It's also in Home and Student, Home and Business, and Professional. So in short, OneNote is in every SKU you can buy of Office, in every edition. And we've added a whole lot of capability that help people take even more advantage of it. So for example, now if I've got a shared notebook, I can see who made what changes. I can roll back versions. I have a much easier search that sort of it just basically lists things much more easily. And unread highlighting is really cool. If I've got a shared notebook with 5 people, every time I open it, I can see which bits have changed since I did that. And finally, the IT piece, right? What have we done for IT, most of the folks in this room? Better performance on new and existing hardware. The first time ever, I believe, that we have managed to release a version of Office that actually runs better on the old hardware than the last one, right? If I was to say what's the #1 upgrade blocker to most people back in history, they would say, I have to upgrade the hardware, right? I can't afford it. And the simple reality is you will find 2010 runs better on 2007 level hardware than 2007 does. So take that into your calculation. So why does it do that? Multi-core investments. We rewrote a number of the engines to take advantage of multi-core. It was a side effect of the fact that we've released the first 64-bit edition of Office. Quick word about 64-bit, because I won't have time to do it later. Very much what we call a hygiene investment. It's something we knew we had to do. We wanted to make the investment at some point, not necessarily mainstream yet. 64-bit, of course, involves 64-bit add-ins. It involves all sorts of complexity around getting the ecosystem to 64-bit. So the great advantage of 64-bit in this release is it allows people to open spreadsheets which are greater than 2 gigs. Right? That's essentially the core usage scenario. So when I say, please go and deploy Office, what I really mean is, please go and deploy Office 32-bit, even on Windows 64-bit, because it runs great. And if you have point places where people need that 64-bit, absolutely, go to town. But please don't associate 64-bit Office with 64-bit Windows and assume you need them together. And please don't assume that there's some phenomenal performance increase from 64-bit Office that you don't get in 32-bit. Most of our performance increase is actually coming from those core investments, multi-core GPU. Leads to things like 90% improvement in Excel charting. There's a cool video that shows things that used to take 10 minutes, taking 5 seconds in terms of charting. 25% improvement in startup time for Outlook, possibly the most significant one for anyone who runs a help desk here. Shut down less than 10 seconds. The asterisk is for 97% of scenarios. So by and large, we have made huge strides forward, but legally speaking, the asterisk is still there. And better security, right? Better security is really important. First thing we did was reduce the attack surface. So protected view, when I open a document, when I open an attachment, when I open a document from an unknown source, it automatically goes into what we call protected view. And that means that essentially most of the editing code is disabled until the user says, yes, I want to edit this document. Very transparent, very easy, very obvious, but it allows us to dramatically reduce the attack surface for those documents that could potentially be threats. Crypto agility, we support crypto new generation, next generation, whatever it's called, so you can enforce things like password complexity on documents within Office 2010. If you have particular security requirements or require particular crypto engines, introduce that in 2010. And file block and validation, so Automatically, files are validated, particularly binary files, and if we find something odd, then it will warn the user. And this is all customizable via GPO, so you can turn this on or off according to your needs. I would imagine you're saying this. So, sure enough, out of time. So let's do it anyway. Okay. You know what? I'm going to go back there so that I can wake my machine up because I made the most basic demonstrator mistake ever. Which is I let my machine go to sleep. So, let's try again. Ta-da. All right, what was I going to show you? So, what did I talk about? I talked, first of all, it's all coming apart for me. Right, here we go. First of all, I wanted to talk about video editing in PowerPoint, just because it's cool. So, pick up PowerPoint. Let's just give ourselves a new design here. Something like that. I'm not used to actually looking at a screen over here, so it's not that I've got a click in my neck or anything like that. I'm going to set a layout, and I'm going to say, I'll just take a title only, say cool video, which I think this one is. Notice how easy it is. I just go insert, I go video, I say video from file, and it immediately takes me into whatever directory I was last using videos from, and I can pick up the video. Now that's not particularly the cool bit, although underneath that, things like QuickTime video are now supported. Most of the video formats you can think of are supported, so we wanted to make that easier for users. Now I can do things like that I used to be able to do with pictures in the last version. So for example, I can set it into a particular shape. I can add reflection, which is actually pretty cool. So for example, I'll do that. And more importantly, I can trim it. Who has ever been in a presentation where someone found the perfect video and it was about 7 minutes too long? Yes, exactly. Now nobody. All these rhetorical questions I ask, nobody's had this problem. Right. So we have now we have trimming, right? So I can say trim the video, and when I hit trim video, I get to say, okay, I don't want this little piece at the beginning, and I do want that piece, and I want it to go to, yes, I like that guy, so I think he's a perfect example of the PC user. There we are. Sorry, madam, you won't make it into my cut. And there we are. And so now I have the right piece of video for my presentation. I've got everything here. I can also choose to say start automatically, and that'll do. Let's just give that a go. And you'll see that I get that very, very rich experience. It was short. Did you enjoy the fact that was short? It was more of a trailer. I get the rich reflective experience. Basically, I can integrate very, very easily into whatever presentation I have. So I can do trimming, I can do recoloring, everything you were able to do previously with pictures, you can now do with video. In terms, I had a problem last night because I didn't bring everything I wanted. I had a file I wanted to use to show you something in Excel. Luckily, SharePoint Workspace got me over this problem. I'm able to say, okay, I had already deliberately taken this document library offline, and here is my file. It's called Sales Analysis, July 2009. It was already there for me. And the reason it's saying that is I've been offline ever since. I went there, and so I'll just say, open it up. And I'll go on with my demo because I have all that information right here offline. Always assuming, of course, that I can get to Excel here. There we are. Okay, so because my machine went to sleep, there's just going to be a little bit more time to set this up. One of the things we wanted to do in this release was we wanted to make it much easier for people to use things that we think are incredibly valuable but aren't that easy to use. And a really good example of this is pivot tables. So pivot tables have traditionally been things that have terrified all but an expert group of users. And so we wanted to make sure that in this release, we really had the ability for everyone to use it. Something I'm going to use later on is just slowing down my load here, which is always embarrassing. Come on, machine. There we go. All right, so I've got a pivot table here, but it's not like a pivot table you've seen before. It has these new things which are known as slicers. And what slicers do is they enable me to do a pivot table very, very graphically. So for example, I might decide I want to see all the sales from the year 2007. I hit 2007. You'll notice that the others grey out and my data immediately changes. That immediately makes pivot tables much more accessible, much more intuitive. Perhaps more importantly, you see over on the left, some other things have greyed out here. Everything but mountain bikes and road bikes. It turns out that in 2007, that's all we sold. And so slicers are all about this sort of two-way interaction, right? On the one hand, I can use this. I can easily say, take off all the filters, just show me the countries where we sold bike stands, and I get an immediate summary, and I can see the data. So two-way. On the one hand, I select what data I want to look at. On the other hand, when I select that, I see a summary of what that data is. I think I'm going to jump, just because I was right. I did actually overestimate how much time I was going to have here. Some of the things that we're doing in Outlook, in particular around conversation view, are very important. So the first thing you'll notice that's new in Outlook is the search. If I hit the search bar, I now get this very fancy new UI, which of course is the result of adding the Fluent UI to Outlook. And I can very, very quickly go, okay, show me just the things that have attachments. Show me just, well, take that one off. Show me just the things that are flagged important. Show me things by categories. So it's super easy for users to drill down and find stuff. The other thing I have that's new in Outlook is what we call conversation view. So here I have 120 mails, as you can see at the bottom. If I say show in conversation view, I will only see a small number of conversations. And so coming in the morning, I can start to think about my world in terms of the most important conversation, not necessarily the mail that I got last. So let's have a look at some of the other things we can do from this. If you've ever had a situation where a mail thread started to get out of control and you just want to close it off, you will love Reply with Meeting. This enables me to hit the button. It says Reply with Meeting. It immediately sets me up a meeting. It puts the email in for context. And if I were connected to an Exchange server, it would allow me to select a room as well at the same time. So very, very easy way to go from a mail thread into a meeting. A very easy way to make your machine stop, it would seem. Oh, that's not good. Only ever happens in a room full of technical people, I've noticed. That really isn't good. Okay. As I was saying, I haven't got time for any more demo at the moment. All right. We'll come back to it if we can. So let's get on to probably what you really came for, which is less about... The one point I do want to make is, look, if you don't believe the value's there in Office, obviously I'm going to have a lot of trouble convincing you to deploy it, right? So if you don't believe the value's there by something close to the end of the week, there are lots of ways you can find out. You can go to tryoffice.com. You can stop me in the hallways. I will be stalking the hallways of TechEd. And if you don't believe there's value in Office, by all means, feel free to come and tell me about your situation, and I will attempt to convince you what the value is. It'll be fun for the audience, trust me. There is various other things that you can try. There are documentations online. You can go to Microsoft.com Office. But more than anything else, please use the week to convince yourself that Office 2010 is key. Oh yeah, and come to my session on Wednesday where I talk about Office and SharePoint together, which is possibly where the really cool stuff starts to happen. Now I'm going to assume that you want it, and it's too hard to migrate and deploy. So this is where I want to introduce you to OfficeITPro.com. Who's been here? This is a serious one. Who's been here? Okay, we should, oh, 2. That's almost as many as had that other issue before. So we need to stop inventing URLs is obviously the solution here. OfficeITPro.com, please write it down. Okay, OfficeITPro.com is where you go. Look for 2010. I'm never going to get through all this stuff. This is where you will find it. The resource centers are the key, right? The resource centers for updates, compatibility, product activation, mobile productivity, web apps deployment, and user readiness and training. I'm going to keep making this point, right? OfficeITPro.com, because this is literally the one-stop shop. Oh yeah, other cool thing we did. Lots of new transitions. So, deployment pane, compatibility, feature function change, maintenance and migration of macros and scripts, ISV application upgrades. I'm going to talk a lot less about getting Office on the tin because I think that's a problem many of you have solved. Actually, deploying the files isn't so hard. Pile of tools to do that, and you all have your infrastructure. The real challenge I hear about mostly is people are worried about compatibility. They're worried about how they're going to migrate things. They're worried about whether key macros in the business will still work. So I'm going to talk more about that side of the business. So, what we've done in 2010 is we really think we've introduced this time a comprehensive tool set for migrating to 2010. Whether you're coming from 2007 or whether you're coming from 2003 or whether you're coming from, heaven forbid, 97, we have pretty much a comprehensive, you all laughed. You don't know the truth. So, Office 2010 Compatibility Inspector Tool. There are 3 things you need to know about. And they're a little confusing, so let me try and clarify them for you. The Compatibility Inspector Tool is all about analyzing individual pieces of code. So macros, add-ins, making sure that a particular macro will work. I'm going to show you this quickly, so I won't go on about it now. That's its job. It goes through a macro and it says, hey, these things have changed in the object model. You might want to take a look at this. This might not work. It's not designed to remediate that. It doesn't change your macro. But what it does do is it tells you which pieces of the macro need attention. So that's the first thing. The Office Environment Assessment Tool is kind of similar, except that it's designed, this was the piece we really felt was missing last time. The Office Environment Assessment Tool goes out and looks at whatever sample of your network you point it to, and it says, what is the situation here? What are the add-ins that are running in your environment? And it also says, what are the ISV applications that are running on Office in your environment that might be blockers to upgrading? And it enables you to get a kind of a snapshot view of the things you're going to need to think about. And it also includes some code from the Compatibility Inspector tool so that as you go out and have a look, I'm sorry, I lied. That's the Planning Manager. That's what the Environment Assessment tool does. I told you it was confusing. It basically goes out and says, here are the add-ins and the ISV things you need to look out for. It's not really intended to give you a comprehensive summary of every machine on your network. It's more about getting a view of what the add-ins are out there. And then the Office Migration and Planning Manager really does go right the way through. It allows you to go and take a look at document fidelity. It enables you to go out and check every machine on the network, and it includes code from the Compatibility Inspector tool, so you can actually literally go out and see all the macros in your organization that could cause a problem. And then you can do some prioritizing. You can say, which of these are on mission-critical machines? Which of these will I only worry about when users come to me? I should make the point that it sounds bad when we talk about this. The vast majority of macros, the vast majority, will just work. Right? So this is really about making sure that those edge cases don't cause you too many problems. Obviously, we make every effort every time to keep the object model as much the same as we can. So let's take a look at the Compatibility Inspector. So it integrates into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Visual Studio. And it uses information about object model differences to just say, this macro needs this attention. And so you can comment the areas that need that. It links to MSDN for more information. It scans declare statements for 60-bit compatibility. It would be easier to look at this, and assuming that my machine has come back, that is what we'll do. Are you still there? Oh, you really are stuck, aren't you? All right. Okay, so let's call this up. So here I have an Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to open a different one here. At least I hope I am. Actually, what I'm going to do is go into the backstage and say, show me my recent files. Where has my... I hate it when this happens. That is really quite bizarre. All right, so I didn't get enough sleep. Let's just use the generic excuse. I didn't get enough sleep, but once I start Word here, you'll see why it didn't show up in the list of Excel files. It's because the example I have is actually a Word document. So, ta-da! All right, so here is a Word document that has a macro in it, right? And the macro is a fantastic macro, actually. It takes in today's date, highlights it, and makes it 5 sizes larger. So some pretty exciting development there, any of you in the room who are developers. What's not important is the macro. What's important is what I can do with it. So I go into the Developer tab in Office, which of course you turn on in the options, and I say, I'd like to inspect the VBA code. And this is because I've installed the OCCI, it immediately brings us up. It adds those 2 buttons at the top. I say inspect the code, and it says, what do you want to do? My answer is, I want to do all of these things. I click inspect. It inspects it, and it says, there are 19 lines of code in your macro. There was 1 item that needs some attention because we've made a change. So just 1 out of all that. So as I said, this is a tool that enables you to work with individual macros, but the Planning Manager allows you to go out and find all the macros that you may need to look at. Okay, so you've kind of got, this is the tool for detailed analysis. That tool enables you to find them. So let's go in, let's save the report. And nothing particularly unexpected here, except that you'll see that it actually tells you what the module was, what the macro was, what the actual item is that's causing the problem, what the link is to go and get more information about that object model change, and what the actual line of code is that's causing the change. So this is something that changed between 2003 and 2010. More importantly, probably, or perhaps easily, if I go in and actually edit the macro, you'll see that it's actually added some comments into the macro so that the developer can go through, look at all of these and say, these are the things that I need to change. As I said, it doesn't attempt to actually change the macro itself. It just goes through and warns you where there could be issues. Make sense? Make sense? Okay. So, that's that one. Let me whip back here. That's painful. Right. So, the environment assessment tool, on the other hand, is less about macros and more about actually figuring out the environment that you're trying to do this upgrade in. So, it checks for currently installed applications, checks for add-ins currently in use by Office clients. It checks for programs that are not registered as add-ins but still interact with Office. So it's trying to warn you about the things you might not think about when you do the upgrade. And it also includes an add-in assessment, which is a list of third-party programs and information about the program's compatibility with Office 2010. So if I very quickly look at that, you'll see that when I start it up, what you do with the environment assessment tool is you run it on as many machines as you want. So you could run it on every machine, but then typically you would choose an assessment. We recommend about 20 to 25% of the machines. And you can deploy it using the classic login script. You can deploy it using SCCM. You can deploy it however you want. But before you deploy it, you go through and you configure the settings file. Right? And so this creates an XML file that you put out with the OEAT.exe file, and then it runs on every machine. So let's just whip through that very quickly. So it's going to check for Windows system information, and it's going to check for add-ins in both the file system and the registry. So in the file system, it looks for executables in the right place. In the registry, it will look for registry settings typically used for add-ins. So it tries to do quite a comprehensive view of what's out there. You can also optionally ask it to perform a passive scan over time. If you do this, you'll see you get the warning that you must have administrative privileges on the machine that you're running it on. But you can say, yeah, I want you to scan for, say, 5 days on all these machines, and it will make sure, well, it will basically watch the registry so that if something connects to Office, it will take a note of it, and then it will notify you back again. So that's how it gets around the fact that not all add-ons are necessarily installed into Office, but sometimes just interact with Office, is it does that registry scan to figure that out. You can say next. You have to pick a UNC drive. For the sake of time, I'm just going to stick it in my documents, which of course is not a UNC drive. But you give it a drive into which you have write privileges, and everyone has write privileges. And then out of that, you have the configuration XML file that gets produced. That is the file that you put out with the OEAT onto as many machines as you want, and it will send all the results back. If I actually do a scan of my own system, you'll get some idea of what this result looks like. So scan is complete. Let's compile the results. It says, do I want to compare with known vendor add-ins? So we keep an up-to-date database of add-ins, whether they're compatible, whether they're not compatible. It will download this in real time. This is where the internet connection thing becomes just a little bit interesting. Oh, no, looks hopeful. Loading the raw data into Excel. So if you had put this out onto lots of machines, they would all have sent those files back to that one location. When you ran this, it would compile all of them into that one Excel spreadsheet. The demo gods are not with me. Ah, yes, they are. Excellent. It's going to build me a summary report. And sure. It gives me a summary report of scanned systems, tells me how many systems have been scanned. It also gives me a pile of useful information just about my organization in general that will help me as I go through this process. More importantly, it shows me what the Microsoft Office add-ins are that are installed, and it shows me add-ins that are not shipped with Office. And there are really three things that can come back. There's a compatibility of unknown, which means you need to go out and find out more about this thing. There's partial match, which means the name of this add-in is known, but this didn't correspond to something that's in the database in terms of version, which means that essentially more research to be done on that as well. And then there's exact match. An exact match, of course, means, yes, we found that add-in existed, and we were able to tell you what the status is. And then for each one, there's also useful linkages back to information about those particular add-ins. So if your big concern is that as you do this upgrade, add-ins were going to stop working, this is the solution to getting around that. Does it mean you don't have to do any work? Of course not. What it means is the surface area of how much work you have to do can be narrowed down much, much more easily. Instead of having to test every machine, you know exactly what subset of machines you're dealing with. And then the Migration Planning Manager, which is the tool that enables you to go out and check literally every machine on the network. It scans and reports. It identifies potential file format and document format compatibility issues. You know, we did a pile of work, both in 2007 and 2010, to try and minimize these. So we have compatibility packs back for 2003 and XP. When you do things in Office 2010, it takes them back very effectively to the previous versions. So for example, SmartArt. If you use SmartArt in Office 2010, and then someone opens it with the compatibility pack in 2003 or XP, they will get that same representation. They'll just get it as a picture. So they won't get editable SmartArt, but they'll get the idea of what you were trying to do with the SmartArt. So we worked actually really hard to build an experience so that as you're migrating, the content is going to work across both of them. So that's what this is going to do. It's going to go out, it's going to find all of the various compatible, non-compatible things across your entire organization and give you that information. And we added some of the stuff from the OCCI so that you can scan files from macro and VBA code if you choose to do this. The reason we made those tools separate is that there's different sorts of sizes of organization and needs here. So we wanted the OCCI to be very specifically about checking individual macros and being able to do something about those. We wanted the environment assessment tool to be for those organizations that had really good software asset management and only really needed to get a flavor for what their environment looked like. And then we upgraded the Office Migration Planning Manager, which is kind of the granddaddy of them all, which actively goes out and seeks every machine on the network and wants to give you a completely comprehensive picture, right? So you can choose how you want to use those tools and how you want to use them in combination. And so generally the recommended process would be start with the Office Environment Assessment tool, go out and look at 20-25% of the machines on your network. It's very low risk, it's very non-invasive, and it gives you a way to understand how big a project you're looking at here. It gives you a way to understand the magnitude of the add-ins, the macro challenges, the document challenges. Then if you want to go out and get a much more comprehensive view prior to starting the project, the Office Migration and Planning Manager is the next step. And that's going to take some more bandwidth, it's going to take some more time, but it's going to give you literally a machine-by-machine assessment of what you need to do. And then once you've found what all those macros, what all those add-ins are, then the Office Code Compatibility Inspector is what you give your developers to enable them to very quickly see which things are going to need to be changed in order to support mission-critical macros. It's what you give your help desk people in order to know if someone rings up after the migration with a macro problem, they can very quickly figure out what it is about that macro that's a problem, pass it on to developers for remediation, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's generally the recommended process. Did I mention that at officeitpro.com there is vastly more information about this process, about each of those tools, and the particular resource center you will want is the Compatibility Resource Center, where you have access to them all, you have manuals for them all, and you have much more information. I need to do a couple of things in 60 seconds. The first is Office and App V. I'm not going to talk deeply about App V and Office because A, there are lots of App V sessions here, and B, our big investment in App V this time around was to make sure that Office 2010 worked much more effectively with it. And so what do we say about it? We say that it certainly has the potential to simplify deployment and management, and it's best used with, if you like, simple Office installations. The more connection points you have, obviously, the more complex the streaming becomes and the sequencing becomes. But it has real potential for the simpler Office implementations in the organization. So we made App V investments to improve support of Office 2010, and we made Office 2010 investments to improve support of App V, so it will work better. Requires App V 4.6, and of course it requires deployment-specific sequencing, which is why, incidentally, we haven't put out default sequences for Office, because we expect, frankly, that just about every organization will have its own particular combination of add-ins and scenarios that they want to build and test. So we have lots of guidance on how to sequence. We have a lot less pre-packaged, if you like, because when we went out and actually started researching, we found as many sequence scenarios as we had customers. So some of the examples of things we've done, the fast search works with Windows Desktop Search, which it didn't if you tried to sequence 2007. Does things like URL protocol handlers, the send to mail integration works. Directly open, edit, and save hosted documents in SharePoint. It was very difficult to make work in 2007. Send to OneNote print driver, and the activation model support. All of those things now work with Office 2010 under App V, which did not, or not without extreme difficulty, under Office 2007. That's the 60-second version of App V and Office. 2 words, it's better. The 60-second version of deploying the web apps, and I'll talk a little more about this on Wednesday, just wanted you to be aware, obviously the web apps are deployed on SharePoint. They can be deployed on SharePoint Foundation services or better. The key information there, hardware requirements, software requirements. Office web apps are supported in Internet Explorer 7 and 8, Firefox 3.5 or better on Windows, Mac, and Linux, and Safari 4 on Macintosh. So really very, very simple deployment. If you actually go, of course there's more information. You'll be surprised to learn in the Resource Center on Office Web Apps deployment. When you go there, you will find it's actually an extremely simple process to add the Office Web Apps onto a SharePoint server. Really not challenging as compared to deploying the rich client at all. Did want to talk a little bit about activation. We have changed the Office activation from previous releases. That's the bad news. The good news is that it enables you to do much easier centralized management and software asset management. And the even better news is that it uses the same infrastructure as Windows Vista, Windows 7, and Windows Server. So if you've built an activation mechanism for your Windows 7 deployment, then this will just work with it. Okay, we used to have separate mechanisms for all our products. We are trying to build one thing to make your life easier. The not particularly easy news is if you haven't done this, then there are some concepts to get your head around. So here's a very, very quick summary. The first is that there are really two basic options. There is the multiple activation key. And a multiple activation key is just literally a 25-digit key that allows you to activate up to 50 PCs. And that's issued from the VLSC, the Volume License Service Center, based on what your licensing is. All right, so that's analogous to the old key. The big change is there's no longer an unlimited activation key like there used to be. So now those MAC keys are limited to 50 users, or 50 machines, sorry. The key management server is for every other scenario. So you install the key management service on any of a number of machines. Typically you need only one. You can have a backup. They can handle thousands of activations, so it's not a large overhead. And as I say, it can be the same one as you're using for Windows Vista. And basically what happens with a key management server is that the machines that need to be activated connect back to that key management server and pick up the activation key. So in pretty much every scenario, it's really pretty easy to have this being very transparent. And the key point I want to make, because you will go and you will read and you'll find the scenario that is going to work for your organization, but we really did try to design it for the real world, right? So we wanted to build activation in a way that protected everybody's interests and made it possible for you to manage the assets, but also suited what you were trying to do. So we did design it for everything from small business right through to large, secure enterprise scenarios. And if you go in, you will find on OfficeITPro.com, you will find very detailed instructions for all of those scenarios. So you should find that activation is not a significant overhead as long as you think about it and as long as you decide what strategy you're going to use. I'm aware, incidentally, that I am in the session before lunch and that lunch is imminent. So if you'll bear with me for 15 minutes, that will really help, and you do get lunch as a reward. Volume Activation Management Tool, this is one of the things that we added to this scenario. It enables you to actually manage all of your keys in one place, which is really very helpful. So not just volume licensing keys, but keys you bought in retail, keys you get off MSDN, all of those things managed from the one place. And it means that you can monitor the license state of your entire enterprise, again, across Office, across Windows 7, across servers. So it does actually put you in a really, really good position for understanding what you're running, how it's licensed, all in that single place. And you can manage product activations from within the volume management tool. That incidentally includes labs, since it's a technical conference. If you're in a lab situation, it's possible to reactivate the same machine when it's rebuilt over and over again, assuming no hardware changes. So there are no issues with doing that. That's one of the scenarios that we built for. And just good to know things. Clients need to connect to the key management server every 180 days. That's about 6 months. So a machine only needs to connect once every 180 days to stay activated. You need at least 5 clients on a KMS host, otherwise it won't activate itself. No activation required for our 2010 server products, so SharePoint, Exchange, there's no activation mechanism there. Details I just put there for reference. If you're imaging Office, if your distribution method is imaging, you should rearm before you do the imaging, and that just saves you a load of problems later on. Details there. Key point, Office Pro Plus and Office Standard have full functionality in volume licensing regardless of activation status. So even if a machine does fall out of activation status, the user can still do everything. Right? The user won't have any issue. You do get this conscience nagging red bar at the top, and you do get a dialog box saying this copy needs to be activated. But they can get past that, and they can keep working. So as you can see, we're really trying hard to balance software asset management and obviously the interests of ensuring that licensing is related to deployment with inconvenience factor and making sure that actually your enterprise can continue functioning and activation isn't some enormous overhead on either you or your users. And of course, there is more at OfficeITPro.com. So volume activation, detail on how to set this up. As I say, you will find yourself needing to do it effectively once only. for the first of Windows Server 2008 R2, Windows 7, or Office 2010, whichever you put in first, and then you'll be able to use that same infrastructure going forward. And the final one, my users can't cope with change. I don't want to train everyone again, and the ribbon scares everybody. So this time we figured out, finally, that some of the things that were most popular with Office 2007 were things that we put out much later to help get users over this hurdle. So I just wanted to sort of give you some idea of what we're doing to help you ease the user transition. Because we realize it usually falls on you guys to actually help bring users along. And this is actually an opportunity to sort of, get out, if you like, and promote some of the value that IT is bringing to the organization by managing this process really, really effectively so that users feel the new value and don't feel that they've been left in the dark by this process. And so what's new? Obviously, there's all the features and capabilities. It goes without saying. Users should get better performance. 64-bit, as I said, for point situations. Users will get much stronger SharePoint links. So if you have a SharePoint scenario in your organization, you'll find that Office 2010 does things easier, right from saving to SharePoint through to more complex things like enterprise content management, things like that, work much more transparently and easily. So users should see benefit from that. The backstage, in particular the printing experience, is vastly better. The ribbon customization, our research shows that about 14% of users customize the ribbon. They weren't able to in 2007. As soon as we said in Office 2007 you can't customize the ribbon, about 95% of users decided they wanted to, right? Historically, that number has been about 14%. Nonetheless, in 2010, you're able to. So you can make customization changes to the ribbon if you want to. For some users, that's important. And return of the File tab. So you remember the little icon in Office 2007? Caused us so many problems because people didn't realize you had to click it. You've seen it, right? You know the icon? Yeah, you've seen it. You've taken the calls on it, right? In fact, a series, if you were watching the beta of Office 2007, right towards the end, a series of increasingly desperate attempts to make that button obvious, ranging from gentle glowing right the way to putting a big red ring around it and making that flash. None of those worked, really. You had to go out and tell users, click this icon. So in 2010, a sort of a back-to-the-future solution. The File tab is back. They hit File, and they find all of those things, just like they did in 2003. So see, we do listen. We do take feedback. We do occasionally say, yep, not such a good idea. The way it was, excellent idea. And vast amounts of user help and training material, right? So far more comprehensively available than at release. So I would suggest putting your users on a 3-step plan. Here is a typical user who hears that Office is about to change. And this user, he doesn't have a big moustache. He's in fact unhappy. Okay? First thing you can do is you can build awareness before migration to drive excitement. And I'll show you what we've got for tools to help you do that. At that point, they're a little bit ambivalent about this. And so you give them training options and Migration Monday assistance. Because when all's really said and done, the thing people are terrified of is this Migration Monday. Office changed. Now I can't do my job. So it's a very critical phase. First of all, there's how do you prepare them. Then there's how do you keep them productive on day one. And that's the critical moment in this kind of psychological battle, if you like. And then, of course, there's a third step, which is how do I build skills so that this isn't just Office 2010 deployed with everyone using it like it's Office XP. It's actually people finding and being able to use new stuff. But that can happen afterwards. That's not critical on the day. It's not time dependent. So we've built materials for each of these three. They're freely available to use. Almost without exception, they're customizable. So if you think they're a bit Microsoft markety, you can demarket them, but you can take the content and make use of them. So, home use program. The single greatest tip I can give you is that if you have software assurance and you have access to the home use program under that, get it out there. Get people on Office 2010, it's available now, at home. Because Office 2010 at home is where there's no pressure, or at least no work pressure. I won't claim no pressure at home at all. So when I'm working when I'm working at home, I can try these things out. There's not the same pressure, and people start to get familiar. And CIOs I've talked to, I literally had a CIO 8 weeks ago now in our executive briefing center, and I suggested this as a tip, and he was like, I've done that. I said, how did it go? He said, you've turned my problem around. My previous problem was nobody wanted to change. Now everybody's asking me, why haven't we done this yet? He said, I'm no better off. So the impact of that is you need to get the timing right, but it's an incredibly effective way to train by stealth. Then we have excitement materials, link right there, for IT to use. So we have posters that show off some of the new features. We have flyers that you can give out at events or we sometimes do cafeteria demos we find are very effective. Just things to start to drive excitement. We have what we call at-work guides, which are more comprehensive explanations of how the new products can help you do some of these things. And we have email templates. This is how IT looks good, right? We've created these very fancy email templates that have these different scenarios that you can mail out to all or a subset of users on a Monday morning that give them some idea of how exciting this is going to be. Step 2, Migration Monday, training the users. The most important thing you will have is the interactive guide. If you haven't seen the interactive guide, please be aware of it. Right. Please be aware of it. I know you all are. Looks like that. My machine will come back in a second, and I'll show it to you right at the end. But the interactive guide basically shows the old UI, lets people click, and then it shows them how to do the same thing in the new UI. So if I'm a user who's going, oh, wow, this is a problem, it's all changed, I don't know how to do stuff, the interactive guide is the single easiest thing for me to work with. Getting started resources, so these are like literally day 1, 2 pages. You put out a physical sheet of paper which shows people the basics of how to navigate the UI, make them feel better. Product guides, we have self-paced training on office.com, and if you have software assurance, then we have e-learning as a benefit as well. Let's see if I've got this back. I hope none of you who were at the hacking session were picking anything up there. So, here's the interactive Word guide, and we have these guides for, I believe, everything except Outlook. Outlook is coming very shortly. It's available. Thank you. Why is it that the field guys know more than I do? It's very annoying sometimes. So, yes, we have Outlook available, and normally they go faster than this when your machine isn't trying to restart all its services at the same time. Here we go. So, I can say, here is a nicely recognizable Microsoft Word 2003 UI. I want to insert something, maybe page numbers, and it shows me, okay, in the new UI, you just go insert, page number. It was that easy. Okay, so if I'm a user who doesn't know where this stuff has gone, then it makes my life, it just reduces that panic factor. So I can have this for each of the applications. Something like tools. Tools is a particularly good one because, of course, in the tools menu, one of the reasons we went to the Fluent UI is that everything weird ended up on the tools menu in 2003. If we couldn't think where to put it, we put it on the tools menu. The Fluent UI is much more cleverly organized, but it does mean that things on the tools menu are all over the place. So if I say spelling and grammar, we see that that's now moved to review, spelling and grammar, which is more intuitive if you're coming to it new, takes a bit of thinking about if you're using the old one. Anyway, so that's the interactive guide. Probably after the home use program, the second most important thing I will tell you today about keeping users happy. And then finally, because I have 1 minute, no I don't, minus 1 minute, skill building. Office ribbon guides, which are comprehensive lists of commands that people can consume. And Ribbon Hero. Has anyone seen Ribbon Hero? Oh man, you need to see Ribbon Hero. Ribbon Hero is basically a game that runs within Word, Excel, PowerPoint. You complete tasks, you get points, you dazzle and amaze your friends. And effectively, if you have a millennial generation workers, it's just brilliant. You set them all against each other and they train themselves. It's phenomenal. You can pick it up from here on the user readiness and trainer page of officeitpro.com. And with that, and that very fancy transition, just 3 things in the summary. If you don't believe Office 2010 has enough new value, stop me in the tech ed hallways, because that's what I'm here for. Okay? Or do some of those other things. Yes, 9.1 million people did download the beta, and that is 5 times more than 2007. It's pretty cool. Now that you want to deploy it and drive adoption, everything you need is at OfficeITPro.com, both IT-focused and user-focused. Please do fill out an eval. That way you can be pretty sure I won't be back next year. Thank you very much. Have a great one.